Hello my friends, welcome to part 11 to my 12-part video series on DNA results of Eastern hunter-gatherers from Sidelkino village in central Russia. This village has been inhabited since at least the Mesolithic period, and we are going to explore the autosomal DNA results and the basically the DNA results of a Mesolithic period inhabitant of this village, an Eastern hunter-gatherer individual who lived in this village, Sidelkino, in the Mesolithic period. So, some information about this individual is it's a male. His Y-DNA, his paternal lineage is R1A, which is nowadays very common in Eastern Europe, in exactly this region. And his mitochondrial lineage, so the lineage that is passed down from mother to daughter, his mitochondrial lineage is U4D. This lineage is also very common for people in Eastern Europe, and it is also very common for various European hunter-gatherers. I think out of the European hunter-gatherers from Sidelkino that I've analyzed, I'm pretty sure all of them have had mitochondrial lineage U, which is definitely very interesting and interesting to note. I don't think I have seen any hunter-gatherer from Sidelkino who had any mitochondrial lineage besides U, which is certainly very fascinating to observe. Now, in terms of the admixture, what more ancient, deeper groups comprise the admixture of this Eastern hunter-gatherer? We're going to discuss this right now. So, Eastern hunter-gatherers descend from a mixture of ancient North Eurasians, which were an Upper Paleolithic group that inhabited Siberia, and hunter-gatherers of Europe, which would be the Western hunter-gatherers who descend from Gravettians, who inhabited Europe previously in the Upper Paleolithic period. So, in terms of this individual, he is descending from a mixture of ancient North Eurasians, which would be Afontova Gara 3, that would be ancient North Eurasian descent, plus a little bit of European hunter-gatherer admixture, which would be marked as WHG. So mostly this individual is of ancient North Eurasian descent, Upper Paleolithic Siberian descent, but he does have quite a sizable amount of European hunter-gatherer, Western European hunter-gatherer admixture as well. And also you can see at the very bottom, he's scoring 2.4% Georgian CHG admixture. That CHG stands for Caucasus hunter-gatherer. So he also has a little bit of Caucasian hunter-gatherer, so Middle Eastern, West Asian admixture as well. And if you watch the other parts to this video series, by the way, tomorrow will come out the 12th part. So tomorrow will be the last part to my 12-part video series. I know you guys are probably very tired at this point because people don't really watch these parts as much as the other videos I put out. I noticed this, unfortunately. But after I am done with all the 12 parts, you will notice that typically all of these samples from Sidelkino score a little bit of Caucasus hunter-gatherer. They all have a little bit of Caucasian admixture, which is very interesting. So aside from the ancient North Eurasian and the Western hunter-gatherer admixtures, which is what we imagine Eastern hunter-gatherers to be typically, they also have a little bit of Caucasian or West Asian admixture as well on top of it, which really breaks the dogmatic view of what Eastern hunter-gatherers are, because Eastern hunter-gatherers actually have a little bit of Caucasian hunter-gatherer admixture as well. Now, we will be taking a look at his results with Nashakot, so what he looks like, his phenotype. So it looks like for the phenotype he has brown eye color. He has scoring quite high for darkest brown eyes and hazel eyes as well. He definitely doesn't have blue eyes or blue eyes with an ampersand or green eyes. So it's definitely these types of really light eye colors, such as green or blue with ampersand or blue, that is completely out of the picture. He has black hair. Any sort of hair color that is lighter than black is completely out of the picture. He has light brown skin. Actually, olive skin is also possible at 15% likelihood, but he most likely has light brown skin. And it looks like he has wavy or straight hair. And it looks like for nose shape, he most likely has snub-shaped nose, but it's not very... the precision in terms of the nose shape is not very precise. 60 versus 40%. It's not a very precise prediction for the nose shape. So based on what we see here, for the phenotype oracle, I can imagine he's probably going to score something exotic. I'm imagining he's gonna score something quite exotic. By the way, somebody told me on YouTube. I was reading the comments, and somebody mentioned on YouTube. I don't understand how the phenotype thing works. Like, what does it do? The phenotype thing is the phenotype oracle that I made here. Essentially, takes into account the Nashakot results and the facial morphology results. So there is a separate calculator for facial morphology that takes into account SNPs that have to do with facial morphology. So that's what the phenotype oracle takes into account. It has nothing to do with ethnicity. It has nothing to do with what you score for ethnicity. So it doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. The phenotype oracle only looks at what you look like, right? Um, so based on these results, I'm assuming he's gonna score something exotic for the phenotype oracle. And it looks like he does not have blue haplotype 2, no blue haplotype 1. Yes, so he's definitely quite exotic in looks. Very, very dark. He doesn't have any light color events in situation of his LC45A2, so he's very dark. Much darker than any European today. Much darker than any European today. Much darker than even most Middle Eastern people today. And let's go ahead and see what he scores for the phenotype oracle. And it looks like for the phenotype oracle, this is what he's scoring. The closest phenotype to him is actually a European phenotype. How interesting. And the second closest phenotype to him is I guess, a Central Asian phenotype. And the third closest phenotype to him is also a Central Asian phenotype. Actually, I guess it also looks a little bit Native American. Looks sort of vaguely Native American. But once again, I would mention that just because this individual is from Russia doesn't mean he will look like a modern Russian, right? Because people evolve and people change. People who live in this region, what is it? How many years ago? People who live in this region 81 centuries ago are not going to look the same way that people who live there now look, right? Because 81 centuries change a lot of things. Even if there is genetic continuity from people who lived there 81 centuries ago to people who live there now, 81 centuries change a lot of things. People evolve over time. And if we look at the facial morphology oracle, two-way oracle, we see that the closest mixture is a mixture of 50% this plus 50% this. So a mixture basically, this is the closest thing to him. Not even a mixture, just the closest phenotype to him is this dark colored, I think it's called stranded phenotype. And the second closest phenotype mixture is a mixture of stranded plus looks like green eyes plus I think this is like a Mediterranean phenotype. And the third closest mixture is a mixture of stranded plus Central Asian. Then there's also stranded plus whatever this is. Then there is also stranded plus South Indian. Very, very interesting. Let's look up, does he have any EDAR, any exotic genotypes in EDAR? No, he does not. He has European genotype in EDAR. For facial morphology panel, he has a genotype for longer mid-face length, larger nose size, nose pointing up, and lower rows of missing teeth. Really cool. Okay. Let's see what he scores for the biomarkers panel. It looks like he's got a predisposition to higher level of vitamin D, which is really good. Slightly higher level of LDL cholesterol, which is bad, but it's okay. It's still average. It's still sort of an average level. Slightly higher level of HDL cholesterol, which is okay. Which actually is good. It's good. Slightly lower level of glucose, which is good. Slightly higher level of hemoglobin, which is good. Slightly higher blood pressure, which is bad, but it's okay. It's not that bad. It's not like dangerously high. Slightly higher level of iron in the blood, so it looks like he might have the Celtic curse. Let's look that up. Hemochromatosis. Nope, there is no variants that were found in the file that are in the HFE gene, but there's other variations that are not in the HFE that play a role in the score. He is scoring above average for it. Looks like he's got above average level for sex hormone binding globulin. Looks like he's got slightly below average for red blood cell count, and he's got below average for telomere length. So it looks like he's got some predisposition to lower lifespan, and above average for height. So some predisposition to be taller than average. Really, really cool. Okay, now let's go ahead and check what he scores for the polygenic risk scores. All right, for the polygenic risk scores, he's got I'm gonna ignore everything that's average. He's got low score for kidney stones, really, really cool. Low score for hemoglobin E disease, really cool. He's got a higher score for lupus. He's got below average score for gout. He's got high score for eczema. He's got high score for AMD, age-related macular degeneration. I have a hard time pronouncing that. Degeneration is a difficult word to pronounce for me, especially when I'm rushing. He's got a very high score for rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, let's look that up in the file. That's a ridiculously high score. Let's look that up in the file. So he's got a genotype for 4 to 6 times risk of rheumatoid arthritis. That makes sense. And he's got a genotype for lower risk of rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, interesting. All right. He's got higher odds for asthma. He's got lower odds for leukemia. He's got higher odds for vitiligo. Okay, cool. I think I've seen risk variance for vitiligo in the HLA gene, so that makes sense. He's got lower odds for myopia. He's got slightly higher odds for male pattern hair loss, which is not surprising because he is a West Eurasian. It's actually a little bit low for somebody of West Eurasian ancestry. He's got slightly above averages for unipolar depression. And he's got below averages for bipolar type 1, so he's quite protected from bipolar type 1. And he's got low odds for schizophrenia. And he's got lower odds of type 2 diabetes and high odds for type 1 diabetes. Okay, so he's a little bit predisposed to type 1 diabetes. He's got below average odds for Alzheimer's, and he's got slightly below average odds for multiple sclerosis. All right, so the only thing that we really have to worry about here is rheumatoid arthritis. That's what it looks like to me. Looks like he's got 4 risk variants for breast cancer out of 6, which is really dangerous, really something to look out for. 3 risk variants for testicular cancer out of 10, which is actually quite good. Let's look up the cancer panel. Oh, okay. None of the risk variants for testicular cancer are in the important variations, so looks like we don't really know. We don't really have that much relevant information to go off here, so we can ignore that. If we had, I was about to be really excited because if he did not have any risk variants in the keto G gene, then that would be a very good sign. But unfortunately, there isn't information on that in the file. Okay, celiac disease section, 2 risk variants out of 8, which is typical. GSS, no risk variance. Crohn's, no risk variance. Do we have any risk variance here? I don't see any. Okay. For allergies, 6 out of 12, which is kind of high. So a little bit predisposed to allergies. But aside from that, I don't see anything. So the only conditions that he really needs to look out for is rheumatoid arthritis and type 1 diabetes. Okay. Let's go ahead and go over the monogenic traits and find out what there is to talk about. So it looks like for warrior versus warrior, he has a predisposition to warrior phenotype. Like most of these other Eastern hunter-gatherers, he's also scoring warrior phenotype. He is scoring that. He's scoring warrior phenotype despite having GG genotype in Comates-Valmet variation, which is very, very interesting. So despite having GG genotype in Comates-Valmet variation, he is still scoring warrior phenotype. Very, very cool. So he's a warrior in Comt, and he has a predisposition to intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. So he's got well, I did not really describe to you what warrior versus warrior means, so I'm going to go back to that. So essentially, the dichotomy of warrior versus warrior, warriors tend to have higher activity of the COMT and MAOA enzymes, which break down dopamine, which essentially means they would have less dopamine in their system at all times, which is beneficial when you are in an overwhelming situation where you have higher dopamine production. So then you reach the optimal level of dopamine for function in this high stressful situation. So in these warriors, when the shit hits the fan, in this sort of terminology, when shit hits the fan, they are able to function optimally because they reach an optimal dopamine level for functioning. But normally, when there isn't that much stress, their dopamine levels are below the threshold, optimal threshold for functioning. When it comes to warriors, though, warriors have lower activity of COMT and MAOA, so these enzymes that break down dopamine aren't working that much in their case. So they have higher dopamine levels at all times, which means that when shit isn't hitting the fan, and when there isn't that much stress, they have enough dopamine to function well, and they can focus and motivate themselves and achieve and study and do whatever and accomplish things when there isn't that much to worry about. However, when there is things to worry about, when the stressful situation comes and the dopamine production naturally increases, they aren't able to function that well. So warriors have problems in stressful conditions, but normally in conditions that are not stressful, they are able to perform very well. So this individual is just like the rest of the samples, like the rest of the 11 samples I've looked at, is a warrior. Very, very interesting. Very, very, very interesting. It's also a very European trait to have. And when it comes to DRD2 panel, this individual is predisposed to intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain. So it looks like when it comes to DRD2 panel, he's got a predisposition to intermediate number of dopamine D2 receptor sites in the brain, intermediate predisposition to such conditions as schizophrenia and bipolar. And for levels of 5-HT and serotonin, looks like he has a predisposition to intermediate levels of that. So intermediate predisposition to such conditions as anxiety and depression. For autism, he has a predisposition to higher odds of autism. So, yep, pretty much that's it. Actually, that's something very interesting here. For lactose persistence, he's actually got a predisposition to intermediate or lower odds of lactose intolerance. So he's actually predisposed to being lactose persistent, which is very, very interesting. He has this genotype in LCT, which leads to being likely lactose persistent. This is not one of those main variations that are implicated in lactose persistence that like 23andMe or Ancestry look for. But I did some digging and I did identify this as one of the variations that are also implicated in lactose persistence. So there you go. Based on this genotype, he is also likely to be lactose persistent, which is very, very, very cool. And also what's very cool about this variation is that the C allele is actually not exclusive to Europeans. You can be a sub-Saharan African or a East Asian and you can carry the C allele here. So in his case, he is likely lactose persistent, which is very, very interesting. For OXTR and empathy gene, it looks like he's got a predisposition to average level of empathy based on these 3 SNPs. Very, very interesting. Okay, what can we talk about here? For cardiovascular disease panel, looks like he has a predisposition to intermediate or lower risk of cardiovascular issues. Really, really cool. For multiple sclerosis, no risk variance in HLA gene, and he does have a genotype that's rare that protects from multiple sclerosis, which is really, really interesting. I remember he was scoring lower for the risk of multiple sclerosis. Vitiligo panel, he does have genotypes in an HLA gene that increase the odds for vitiligo. Based on this, we might expect some genotypes. We might expect some risk. We might expect some bad results for the HLA gene panel. I have a hard time formulating my thought recently. Sorry about that. Actually, let's check diabetes. Do we have any risk variance in the HLA gene here? Nope, I don't see any. No genotypes for that. Okay, for miscellaneous section, no micropenis. Really good to see. Better performing muscles, likely sprinter rather than endurance athlete. All right, cool. And SCN9A gene panel, no variance for increased pain sensitivity. Really cool. Really, really cool. For MTHFR gene panel, it looks like he's got a genotype that leads to a number of risks associated with impaired folate metabolism. So based on that, we can probably assume that the homocysteine panel will look quite bad, because this is the only genotype in the MTHFR gene that he actually has. So this will be the only genotype that makes an impact on the homocysteine panel in the MTHFR gene. so we can expect it to be quite bad. But there's also other variations that play a role in the CNS gene. So I guess we'll see later. But I'm expecting the homocysteine panel to be looking quite bad because of this. Okay, for alcohol panel, it looks like he's got a predisposition to pretty much average predisposition to alcoholism. Pretty cool. No variants for leukemia, no risk variants for leukemia. For rare diseases and traits panel, he's got a genotype for increased risk of rheumatoid arthritis, but we already looked at that. Increased risk for eosinophilic esophagitis. That's pretty much it. No other risk variants. Okay, for celiac disease panel, he's got this genotype right here, which leads to significant increase in the risk of autoimmune disorder. Very, very unfortunate genotype. So he's got severe increase in the risk of autoimmune disorder. All right. Okay. And this will also affect the HLA gene panel quite greatly. Nothing was found here. Canavan syndrome, no risk variants for that. HIV and AIDS panel, no risk variants here. Okay, for HLA gene panel, he's scoring intermediate or slightly higher odds of autoimmune disease. All right, this makes sense. So he is predisposed a little bit to autoimmune disease based on his genotype and HLA. Actually, what's interesting is he's almost scoring highest odds for autoimmune disease, but I guess his genotype wasn't bad enough for that. Anyway, I mean, scoring the way he is for HLA gene panel, it's quite bad. The result is quite bad here. Definitely a little bit unhealthy. Okay, for the MTRR gene panel, looks like he has 2 risk alleles for disorders of intracellular colon metabolism out of 6 in total, which is quite typical. And for the CBS gene panel, he does have. Okay, yes, he's predisposed to elevated homocysteine levels. Exactly. As I was saying, I was expecting this pretty much because even though he doesn't have any risk variants for homocysteinuria, because of this one genotype in the MTHFR gene, he would be scoring. He would be really much predisposed to elevated homocysteine levels. This definitely makes sense for him to score the way he is, and he does have a genotype for decreased homocysteine level, but he also has a genotype for higher levels of homocysteine, and also the impact of the MTHFR. Let's find this. Hold on. The impact of this variation right here is too much. It's way too much. It's much greater than this, for example, than this right here. So yes, it makes sense. I was sort of expecting something like this, to be honest, even before I looked at it. So yeah, makes sense. Okay, for muscular dystrophy myopathies, it looks like no risk variants for that, and no risk variants for ADL. Pretty good. Actually, nothing was found for ADL. So yep. Color blindness panel, nothing was found. For obesity, looks like he has a predisposition to lower or intermediate levels odds of obesity. Pretty cool. And for syncope, based on 1 SNP, he has an average odds for syncope. For biotraits panel, let's see, looks like he's got 2 copies of the hunter-gatherer CLT-CL1 gene variant, reduced ability to process carbs and sugars. So looks like he's a hunter-gatherer, and he's got 2 copies of the quote-unquote hunter-gatherer CLT-CL1 gene variant. All right. And for the blood group panel, it looks like he most likely has blood type O or A. But this is based on 4 SNPs, so I mean, it's not that great of a prediction. Let's try to go over these SNPs actually. So first SNP is likely blood type O or A, makes sense. Second SNP, higher odds for all blood types besides A. Likely no blood type B or AB. Slightly lower odds for B and O. I mean, I think he most likely has blood type O, because blood type O is just so much more common than any other blood type. So I think most likely he's got blood type O, just based on what I know about the distribution of scores, and even the percentages we see here: 52% for O, 44.9% for A. Most likely he's got blood type O. If this was a higher quality file, we would be able to find out better, but with the files that we have here, unfortunately, we have to guess. But I think he most likely has blood type O. Anyway, leave your thoughts in the comments, what you think about this sample. Maybe guess what blood type you think you might have. And make sure you read the description of the video. In the description, you will find the links to download the raw DNA file that I was analyzing in this video, as well as the links to buy my trait predictors executable, which is the executable that you can use to generate these reports for yourself for any sample you want in microarray sequence format, which means the format in like MyHeritage, 23andMe, Ancestry, any of these commercial DNA formats. Or you can buy a report for $4 using my trait predictor. Only $4 for a report that looks sort of like this. Actually, it's going to look a little bit better than this because it's going to have more information than what you see here. Well, anyway, thanks for watching my video until the very end. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.